Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel in partnership with sharpbetting.co.uk, your home for betting tips and analysis. Delighted as always to be joined by Thomas Cathy this Sunday evening or Monday or Tuesday, whenever you're watching this video. We're in post fight reaction mood after Jaron Ennis's very impressive performance over the previously undefeated Imantis Stanionis in Atlantic City. Thomas, just want to touch on the fight beforehand. I was incredibly impressed. I actually thought Stanionis had a good chance of winning. I hold my hands up. I did the final prediction video with you. I'm now looking very foolish, but here we are, not for the first time. I think Ennis went from a very average performance in his last fight to an extremely impressive performance last night. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, just like you were, I was surprised, even though I picked Boots to win. I definitely thought that it was going to be a tough night for him, and it wasn't at all. And I think just the size of Jaron Ennis had a lot to do with that. Obviously, we've talked quite a bit about him moving up to 154, and he's definitely a giant welterweight and appeared to be last night, especially compared to Stanionis, who, shorter, has a shorter reach, and that was very apparent. And I think that is what was really his downfall that night. Just a bit undersized and didn't really have the punching power to really affect Ennis at all. And like you mentioned, didn't really look too great against, well, really in his last couple fights, but especially in his last one against Chikadze. And I think that just shows that he performs to the level of his opposition. He needed somebody that's gonna get him motivated, and I think that's what Stanionis was, and he put on a great show.
Yeah, 100%. It's a funny one because I feel like me and you spoke about, is he going to move up? Should he move up? And then he came in, I think it was over half a pound inside the weight limit. I don't think he looked particularly great during fight week, but he came in well inside the limit and then performed like that. So I personally think his next fight will be at 147. I think they're possibly going to they're possibly going to target one of the other champions, Mario Barrios, Brian Norman Jr. But we'll see. It's exciting, isn't it? 'Cause there's so many big fights out there for Boots Ennis. We're going to go through a couple of potential opponents, not necessarily next, but in the future. We don't know how realistic these fights are going to be. Obviously, we're boxing fans. We want to see the big fights. Um, so fingers crossed some of the people we mentioned are fights that we're talking about in the next 12 months. I'll start off with one that I personally don't see happening, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Terence Crawford, Thomas. Undefeated versus undefeated, American versus American. I want to ask you two questions. Could Ennis, based on what you saw last night, could he have beaten Terence Crawford when Crawford was kind of ruling at 147? Or if we saw Ennis versus Crawford at 154, maybe early next year, could you see Ennis winning that fight?
No, assuming that, well, if Ennis fought the 147 version of Crawford, then no, I don't think I saw enough to suggest that he would beat Crawford. And assuming that, if the fight does happen, which we'll see how likely that is, but if it were to happen at 154 and Crawford were to maintain his form because he's getting up there, but if he were to maintain his form and look like he did against, um, I'm blanking on his name, but he just fought Virgil Ortiz.
Madrimov.
Madrimov, thank you. If he looked like he did against Madrimov, um, then I would still probably pick him. I mean,
Okay.
uh, he just seems to have that next level. And Stanionis is a great fighter, but not anywhere near the level of Crawford. So I don't think him as impressive as it was, I don't think Ennis beating Stanionis like that was really enough to suggest that he would beat Terence Crawford.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important not to get carried away. And another kind of factor here is that the 154 move, I just think at times it's looked really likely, at times it's looked, and maybe now we don't know, but I just feel like one thing that's for sure is that the big, the really big fights are at 154. 147, look, Mario Barrios, Brian Norman Jr., we'd all watch it, but it's not one of those that gets you kind of excited, which leads me on to the next fight I want to talk to you about, Thomas. Virgil Ortiz, someone who you just mentioned. A lot of people would say number one at 154, assuming Terence Crawford will never fight at that weight again. Um, would That's a fight that is a name that Eddie Hearn mentioned last night in some post-fight interviews. Who would be your kind of, if that fight got announced in a couple of weeks' time, what would be like your kind of first name that would spring to mind if you had to give a prediction early on?
I would I would favor that's a tough one. I want to say Boots, but Ortiz looked really good against Israel Madrimov the last time out, and he's just such a offensively dynamic fighter, and really puts together the combinations well. Flows like water, and with Boots moving up to 154, I think perhaps Virgil would have the size advantage, and that will be another thing that would play in his favor. So it makes it really tough. I feel like Boots perhaps has the better boxing ability and IQ, slightly, but Ortiz is just such an offensive powerhouse. I it's a really tough pick. I wouldn't feel as confident in Ennis beating him as like a Sebastian Fundora, but it's a great fight. I would love to see that.
Yeah, look, I think that's the fight. Do you know what I mean? I think that's the again, like the Crawford fight, it would be undefeated against undefeated, two of the biggest kind of American stars. And I just can't help but think that what fight would be bigger in 2026 than that fight? I'm sure I'm trying to kind of rack my brains, but I just think that I don't think we're going to have a fight in the heavyweight division that would be bigger than that fight. In the light heavyweight division, I'm not sure who Canelo could fight. That would be a bigger fight than that. Inoue Nakatani would be a big fight in Japan. So I don't know. Like, speak up if you disagree with me, Thomas. But I feel like in 2026, I'm not sure there's a bigger fight than that, and maybe it would need to be marinated, which is a word I hate to use, or built up or whatever for sure. But I'm not sure there's that many kind of realistic fights that could take place next year. So I really hope we see that fight, but we'll see. Final one from me, Thomas. The name you mentioned, a fighter I really like because he's quite unique in terms of kind of his physique. Sebastian Fundora currently holds two world titles. Um, Only the one loss on his record. Still looks good last time out against Chordell Booker. Obviously beat Tim Zhu as well. Who would win that? Who would win that fight for you?
Yeah, I would definitely favor Boots. No disrespect to Fundora. He's looking a lot better. He looked good against, or he looked great against Booker, but I just feel like out of the top guys at 154, like he's just he's kind of the weakest link. And I hate to say that because I mean he's a great fighter, but and I think the height and reach would pose an issue for a lot of people, but I think technically in terms of skills, I I don't see him. I would see Boots beating him decisively,
Okay.
and I would see Boots chopping him down working the body and eventually perhaps stopping him, to be honest.
Mm.
But Fundora has proven us wrong
Yeah.
uh recently, so
Mm.
it would be a great one. But I do feel like out of all the guys in that division, I feel most confident in Boots beating him.
Yeah. No, fantastic. I really like Fundora just purely for the fact he's freakishly tall at that weight, and I want to see who. And I feel like, yeah, we've seen that he kind of can be hurt, but yeah, I want to see who can kind of unlock that code again. And I wonder if that person could be Jaron Ennis, but we'll see. Okay. I could throw more names at you, Thomas, to be honest with you. Tim Zhu is another one who I think could come back. A fight, just let me get your, I know we, let me get kind of get your thoughts on one other fight. And I'm not asking, I think Jaron Ennis would be the favorite here, but we saw Keith Thurman back out in action recently. Does that fight, would that fight, I want to ask, would that fight appeal to you? Because Keith Thurman, obviously, as we know, he's been very inactive, but he did look good against Brock Jarvis. That could be maybe an introduction to 154 for Jaron Ennis. Just kind of thoughts on that one before I let you go.
It would make sense for him to fight a guy like Thurman, just given his name, Thurman's name. It would be good to have that on anyone's resume. And Thurman, he's getting up there as well, and he's been quite inactive, but against Jarvis, he looked really good.
Mm.
So I think it would be an interesting one. I definitely don't think that I don't feel too good about Thurman's chances of winning that, but
Yeah,
I think, like you mentioned, it would be a decent introduction to the weight class
yeah,
if he were to fight Thurman.
yeah. We shall see. We shall see. All right, Thomas, I'll let you go. Hopefully, more big nights in the future for Jaron Ennis after last night's performance against Samantha Stanionis. Thomas, I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Thank you very much for your time.
Likewise, thank you.